All right, let's journey back in time. We're heading to ancient Egypt, and specifically to one of its most incredible, most legendary eras, the Old Kingdom. You know the one. This was the age of the pyramid builders. We're talking about a time of just immense power, of kings who were seen as gods, all run from the great capital city of Memphis. But here's the thing, and this is the real puzzle we're going to unpack today. How is it possible that a civilization's greatest achievement, these incredible pyramids, could also be the very thing that leads to its collapse? It's a huge paradox, right? So let's get into it. So where does this all kick off? We've got to go back to the Third Dynasty. And this wasn't just, a new king on the throne. No, no. This was a total revolution in how people thought. It was the moment humanity looked at stone and said, we're going to build for eternity. And on a scale that was just unimaginable before. And you know what's wild? This revolution happened fast. I mean, really fast. You see the royal tombs just evolve at lightning speed. They start with these simple, flat-roofed tombs called mastabas. Then, someone gets the idea to stack them on top of each other, and bam, you get the step pyramid. And from there, it's a short leap to the smooth-sided true pyramid that we all know and love. This whole progression, it wasn't just about architecture. It was a flex. It was a statement about how powerful the king was becoming. And the guy who really kicked this whole thing off, that was King Djoser. He and his genius architect, a guy named Imhotep, they're the ones behind the step pyramid at Saqqara. And you've got to understand, this wasn't just some cool new tomb design. This was the world's first monumental building made entirely out of stone. It completely changed the game, forever. Okay, so fast forward a bit to the Fourth Dynasty. This is where things go into overdrive. We're talking the absolute peak of the Old Kingdom. This is the Golden Age, the time when kings weren't just kings, they were considered actual gods walking on earth. And they had the resources of the entire country at their beck and call. I mean, the names from this dynasty are legendary. You've got Sneferu, who's Khufu's dad. He's the one who tinkered and experimented until he finally perfected that true pyramid shape. Then, of course, comes his son Khufu, who builds the big one, the Great Pyramid. After him, his son Khafre builds the second pyramid and, oh yeah, the Sphinx. And then comes Menkaure, who builds the smallest of the Giza trio, which might just be our first clue that maybe, just maybe, the treasury was starting to feel the strain. See, building something like the Great Pyramid, it's not just about making a fancy tomb. It's the ultimate symbol of a super-organized, totally centralized government. It was basically a giant billboard that screamed to the world that the king had absolute control over everything: labor, materials, the entire economy. He wasn't just a ruler. He was a god. But here's the thing about absolute power. It never seems to last, does it? You can pretty much split the Old Kingdom into two halves. The first half, all about those super powerful, godlike kings and their mind-bogglingly huge building projects. But the second half, well, that's where we see a huge shift. The kings start to get weaker, their officials get more powerful, and the economy starts a long, slow slide downhill. So the big question is, how did this happen? What changed? Well, as we get into the Fifth and Sixth Dynasties, you can start to see the cracks forming in the foundations of royal power. Bit by bit, control starts slipping away from the king and the central government. A big part of it starts with the Fifth Dynasty kings. See, these guys didn't have a direct bloodline claim to the throne. So what do? They turn to propaganda, specifically religious propaganda. There's this great story from a document called the Westcar Papyrus, and it tells this tale that basically says the new kings are the sons of the sun god Ra. It's a really clever way to create a divine right to rule when you don't actually have one. And you can see things were different just by looking at what they built. For one, the pyramids got a whole lot smaller. That's a pretty clear sign they didn't have the same resources as the guys before them. Instead, their big focus shifted to building these new sun temples dedicated to their patron god Ra. They also started looking outwards, pushing trade expeditions to the legendary land of Punt to bring back things like incense and gold. Okay, pay attention, because this next part is absolutely crucial. The high officials, we're talking the governors of the different provinces, they stopped being buried next to the king. Instead, they started building their own huge tombs back in their hometowns. This was a huge deal. It was a visible sign that their loyalty was shifting away from the king in Memphis and towards their own local power bases. And to top it off, these governor positions started becoming hereditary, passed down from father to son. And once that starts happening, it's like a domino effect. You've got these powerful local lords getting stronger and stronger, while at the same time, the central government's bank account is getting weaker and weaker. You can see where this is going, right? The Old Kingdom was on a collision course with a total collapse. And the final nail in the coffin? It came from a really unexpected place, a king who just lived too long. King Pepi II ruled for an insane 94 years. It's the longest reign in all of Egyptian history. The problem was, he outlived all of his kids, all of his direct heirs. So when he finally died, there was this massive power vacuum, a huge crisis over who should rule next, and the state was already so fragile it just couldn't take the hit. And that dynamic really is the whole story in a nutshell. It's a simple equation, really. As the king's power and the government's money went down, the power of those local governors went way, way up. The two things are completely connected, and for the kingdom, it was a fatal connection. So, you see, it wasn't just one thing that brought the Old Kingdom down. It was a total perfect storm. You had this centuries of economic drain from building these massive pyramids. You had kings giving out tax breaks to temples and powerful officials. Then, those same officials just stopped paying taxes altogether. And to top it all off, there's evidence that a long-term drought hit, with low Nile floods causing widespread famine. It was just one blow after another. The period that came right after this collapse has a name: the First Intermediate Period. And it was pure chaos. The central government in Memphis, gone. Egypt just shattered into a bunch of tiny competing kingdoms, each run by a local warlord. And what came next was decades of civil war and just total social breakdown. There was actually a scribe who lived through it, a guy named Ippur, and he wrote about what it was like. His words just paint this vivid picture of a world turned completely upside down. He says the rich were mourning and the poor were celebrating. The whole social order had been smashed to pieces. And that brings us right back to where we started, to that big question. When you look at the whole incredible story, all the way from the very first stone Djoser laid to the absolute chaos that Ippur described, what do you make of it? What is the real legacy of the pyramid builders? Are they this amazing testament to what humans can accomplish? Or are they a timeless cautionary tale about what happens when ambition goes too far? Something to think about.